Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
All right, we're back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I go over to the website, arneighbors.org, okay? And Mark Moore, who's been a guest on this program many times, he's actually got a post up. And it's very interesting because it says ranking the legislators of 2017. Conduit for Commerce has come out with their rankings for all legislators from the 2017 session. It's very comprehensive. He writes, I noticed that a lot of the names high on their lists were names that were also high on our list of top legislators from the 2015 session. They don't explain it in their article, but I think that the names that are underlined have an asterisk where those who voted against the governor when they needed to a couple of big bills. If I'm not mistaken, those asterisks, by the way, are actually Calvin Coolidge Award contenders. Which we're going to have more on that. But so what happened was, Mr. Mark Moore was very gracious enough to actually mail us or email me an audio clip, 3 audio clips about his opinion on the CFC Scorecard, specifically the methodology. Now, this is important here because the methodology is it's not really in dispute. Well, I mean, it's in dispute amongst legislators who tweet very conservative things, who wake up in the morning, look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm a conservative, and that is their only basis. I mean, that's the real only evidence that we have, because if you actually go look at their voting record, they and Conduit had a great article about this the other day, a kid looking up with chocolate cake all over their face saying, like, I didn't eat the chocolate cake. Well, the chocolate cake on your face is essentially your voting record. I mean, I'm sorry if it pops your bubble. It's very devastating. It's very devastating to some people when they go on American Idol or they go on America's Got Talent, and they've been told their whole lives that they're actually talented. They've told themselves that they're actually talented, and then you get in front of Simon or whoever and the rest of the country, and they're like, yeah, you can't carry a tune to save your life. That's got to be very devastating for some of those people for the first time to realize. And for some of these legislators, they don't like it because they don't like to hear the truth, because they have sold themselves a lie. They have lied to themselves. They've sold themselves an illusion. They think that if you have an R by your name, then you are a conservative and above reproach. They think that if you tweet conservative-sounding things in carefully crafted language and buzzwords, that you are then a conservative. And that's not the case, because you go down there and do the work of the people in their name, and we have the results, and you're really upset about it. I want to say more about the methodology, but I want to get to Mark Moore's opinion here because it's really good. Dan Greenberg over at the ArkansasProject.com, he wrote a piece extremely critical, and you can find on Facebook. You can find some of the legislators who have been vocal. They've been calling Conduit. They've been saying things. I can't believe this scorecard. This is, they've been trying to. They're out there sharing it, in their little echo chamber. Oh, this is such a good read. Oh, this is a long read, but it's really well worth it. Blah 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 blah. This is what Mark Moore says about it. He even references an interview that I did with Brenda Vassar-Taylor last week about how he could comprehend the methodology. He could comprehend what we were doing. Take a listen. Let me see here, Joe. Actually, I have the audio. My fault. Listen to this. This is Mr. Mark Moore. Take a listen.
Okay, the first knock that Dan Greenberg, the first attack that Greenberg had on Commerce's legislative scorecard was, and he went to it over and over again, gee, it's not transparent. We cannot tell how these scores were obtained. I can't. I try to talk to Brenda to try to get something out of her. I just can't understand it. It's not clear. Therefore, really, what do these scores mean? We just don't know how they were obtained. Okay, so I'm going to explain how they were obtained, because I listened to Brenda's explanation, and I think I got it. And if you get what I say in the next 2 or 3 minutes, I guess that means you're smarter than Dan Greenberg. Well, no, I take that back, because this is not a question, friends, of being smart or dumb. This is a question of, like that famous Upton Sinclair quote. He said, It's very difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. So it is in the interest of Dan Greenberg and his salary to not understand how Commerce scores their scorecard, because he runs an organization that puts out a rival scorecard, and he wants you to listen to that one, and also because his wife is in an industry where they're depending on the government. They want the government to do something with these bills that Commerce says is a bad thing. So his salary depends on you not liking and not understanding and not getting anything out of the Commerce scorecard. But really, it's basically like this. They said there's 3 criteria that we're rating these bills on, and we found 30 votes and bills where these criteria come into being. So here's the 30 bills. Here's the ones we're for. Here's the ones we're against. If they voted for a bill we're for, that's a plus. If they voted against a bill we're for, that's a minus. If they voted for a bill that we are against, that's a minus. If they voted against a bill we're against, that's a plus. Does that sound so complicated so far? Well, there's really only one other factor to it. They said, look, since we're evaluating 3 areas, a bill that violates more than one of those areas, say a bill violates all 3 of those areas, that is a worse bill than a bill that only violates one of the 3 areas. So we're going to say that if you voted for a bad bill that violates all 3 areas, we're going to subtract more than we will if you vote for a bill that only violates one of those 3 areas. Now, to me, it can't be explained in 1 or 2 sentences, but it's not crazy complicated either. It's just not as simple as it could be, but it's as simple as it could be to understand that a bill that costs me $1 billion and takes my freedom is a worse bill that only costs me $1 million that's just wasted and doesn't take any of my freedom. It seems to me that it's a little more complicated than pure simple, but not more complicated than it has to be a good measurement. And if Dan Greenberg wanted to understand it bad enough, he could.
Again, that's Mark Moore, and he's got an excellent analysis. You know, we said it last week. Not all bills are created equal, right? And so if you got a bill that's going to take freedom away from a whole bunch of people versus a smaller amount of people, then the whole bunch of people, that's worse. And you could do it with the money that the one that wastes $1 million, one that wastes $1 billion, that sort of thing. Really well said. And as I've gone over the methodology and I've gone back over the interviews, and I look at the scores, and I look at the different methods, and when you combine all of them together, you know what you really have? You have a comprehensive process that produces a very specific filter. Now, when I say specific, what I mean is this is a way to tell, okay, who is on board most consistently with analyzing bills based on the economic freedom filter. I mean, you see, you filter. So, does it grow government? Does it grow dependency on government? Does it spend money we don't have? I mean, if you're voting for a bill that does all 3 of those things, right? And see, what they're upset about is not accepting and proving wrong some of their own messaging. If you take somebody like, excuse me, I got a cough. Sorry, I'm still recovering from my illness. If you take somebody like State Representative Charlene Fite, for example. Charlene Fite, she was the sponsor of that military retiree tax cut they talked about. It was an exemption. In the same breath, they were talking about, we got to get rid of exemptions while they were creating another exemption. Veterans were used as a tool to actually grow government, because now we know, because there's been revised estimates since the bill was passed. Hey, we need to raise these taxes so we can lower these taxes on military retirees. We actually now know that it's a net increase for the government. Therefore, it's actually a tax increase. I mean, talk about violating multiple principles. Talk about something that's like, well, it is a tax cut. Well, no, now the bill is actually much worse because you had to put in these tax increases on digital downloads. You had to put in the tax increases on candy and soda, and so when you don't accept, for example, a title of a bill that has military retirees in it or veterans in it, or I'm saving all puppy dogs from death from now till the end of time. When you actually read what the bill says and understand what it does, more importantly in some of these cases because of carefully crafted language, what it doesn't do, man, and then you report that to the people and you start ranking it, I mean, that's what they're so upset about. The conduit scorecard, I mean, I've had it all weekend to look over even more. I mean, folks, this is a tool, and a lot of work went into it. And it's a very valuable tool, and you're not going to find anything better when it comes to analyzing what those legislators have done in your name, and with the committee votes, what they have done when they thought you'd never find out about it. But there's always going to be people that argue bias. Mark Moore, he had some more to say. Listen to this.
The second thing Dan Greenberg knocked the Conduit for Commerce legislative scorecard for was he said they just had too many biased factors in there. They put in extra elements they didn't have to in a way that made the scorecard more biased and therefore more subjective and perhaps less trustworthy, for example, than the card that his group put out. Now, he did it very cleverly, but he got it right the first time when he said anything done by human beings is going to have some subjectivity to it. You just have to know where their biases are and judge accordingly. But then at the same time, he tries to shift over and get and sit in the seat where his decisions are the most objective decisions a human being can make, whereas decisions that other people make, those are adding more biases. This is how he wants to pose. But I think the opposite is true. Let me give it an example and see if you agree. Let's take two bills. One bill takes $1 million of taxpayer money and just wastes it. It does nothing either good or bad. A second bill takes $100 million of taxpayer money, 100 times as much, and it spends it in a way that reduces your freedom and hurts your children. It's bad spending, not just wasteful spending, but bad spending. So Greenberg, in his effort to pose as the unbiased one, would say, oh, if we're scoring it as a bad bill, it's a bad bill. So a vote for one of those bills is equal to a vote on the other. They're both the same in scoring. Conduit for Commerce would say, no, this other bill spent more money and it didn't just waste it, it spent it on something bad. So we're going to count that as a worse bill. The second bill was a worse bill than the first one. We're going to subtract more from your score if you voted for the second one than if you did for the first one. That is what Dan Greenberg says is adding extra biases and being subjective. No, it's not. It's adding common sense, which he's not doing in an attempt to pose as the least biased person in the room. But the most accurate score would be the way Commerce did it. If you agree with their criteria, if you agree that the second bill is worse than the first bill, then you must agree that the way Commerce scored it is better than the way Advanced Arkansas scores it. Advanced Arkansas scores it in a way that legislators who vote on one bad bill, like Obamacare, that costs us billions and takes away our freedom, is if they vote for that, they can always make up for it by a wave the flag feel-good bill that doesn't do anything good or doesn't do anything bad, but they just like. Point. Maybe it saves $22 or something.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's stupid subjectivity.
Yeah. When you just rate every bill, if every bill, good or bad, is the same. You see, you got to have a weighting system. Right? I mean, let's say, let's go for some Star Wars stuff, right? Just real quick, okay, for my science fiction friends out there, if you're the Imperial Senate and you vote for Executive Order 66 that murders all the Jedi in cold blood, that's bad. But if you, let's say you just voted, I can't believe I'm bringing in the original trilogy. Well, let's say you just voted, for the blockade of Naboo. That's not as bad, right? Joe, come on, you gotta give me a little love here, right? It's not as bad, okay. Okay, so if you vote for something like, okay, I'm going to vote for this, and mass genocide, right? Order 66. Or, we voted to, put some trade restrictions on this one planet or whatever. And it's bad, it restricts freedom. But this other bill here. So we can agree, right, that there are different levels of bad when it comes to your voting record. If you were to just take those two instances, right? Okay, we made some trade negotiations, like we, made a little blockade here, put in some regulations in. Order 66, murder all the Jedi, as soon as Emperor Palpatine tells them to. And I was a rating agency, and I was coming out with my scorecard, and it's like, well, you voted for this one, and that's 1 mark against you. You voted for this one, and that's an equal, just 1 point against you. Like, they're both negatives, but they're both worth the same amount of negative on my scorecard. That's leaving a lot in the dark. That's leaving a lot of people in the dark.
The trade blockade was Order 65. It's like, do you want Order 65 or 66?
Yeah, which one you want?
You got one choice. You can't pick both. One or the other, or none.
But you see the point, right? And that is the difference. That is the difference in a scorecard that's trying to give people an accurate filter of what they're really doing. Because the truth is, there does need to be a system that scrutinizes much, because the deck is so stacked against us because we're not even down there, right? I mean, I'm down there, but most of you are not even down there. You're not there to witness it. Just that fact alone leaves the door so open to legislative sleight of hand and corruption and getting away with stuff they think you're never going to find out about. And I'm thankful for Conduit. I'm thankful for their scorecard. I'm thankful for their commitment to principles. And if you're in the like Brenda, I think Brenda said this on Friday, and we got that interview up at the YouTube channel. There's still some. Maybe I don't know if she said this specifically, but there are some good legislators who didn't make the top 10, right? There's some good ones out there. There's still good legislators. They just didn't. It was competitive, They just didn't. When you put this specific filter on them, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it'll be a wake up call to some. I don't think it'll be a wake up call to people like Charlie Collins, who just dismiss it as fake news, because it's bad news for him. We've got to take a break. The phone number 870-275-9799. Back in a moment.
Dan Greenberg's third knock on the Commerce Legislative Scorecard was that it included committee votes as part of the scoring. Now, you might think, oh, gee, that's good. We're finally getting more information than we get when we just get their votes out in the chamber, because a lot of times out in the chamber, it's a done deal. They just trust the committee, and they usually vote the committee's way, unless it's a division on partisan lines or something. But the committee votes are sometimes the key votes. Plus, there are legislators, they'll vote for something in a committee, maybe the necessary vote needed to get it passed. And then when they go out on the floor, they'll vote against it and tell their constituents they were against it, when really their vote in committee was essential to getting it on the floor where they knew it would be passed. And that kind of trickery. Conduit, by actually measuring the committee votes, something other groups, I haven't seen them doing much of, they are actually providing the constituents a better view, a more comprehensive view of what the legislator is doing. Now, is this at the expense of something? Yes, this is at the expense of the personal ambition of each legislator to be high on this list. That's what you give up when you more accurately and more thoroughly report on the performance of all legislators by counting committee votes. You give that up. Is that trade-off worth it? Yes. If it's about the constituents knowing how each of their legislators is doing, rather than the egos of some individual legislators who want a chance to go higher on the list, Yes. You look, Talk Business did a ranking of legislators too, and they put out the ability to get things done as one of their priorities. And so Joyce Elliott made the list because she can get things done. They're bad things, but she can get them done. The Democrat Gazette used to put out a list ranking legislators, and that was one of their criteria too, getting things done. To me, getting on the right committees would just be a part of being able to get things done, making that a factor in the criteria. But it's a legitimate factor. Other people did it. And Advanced Arkansas, I don't ever recall them complaining when other people put
talking about Dan Greenberg
ability to get things done as one of the criteria that they graded legislators on. Well, this is simply an indirect way of measuring ability to get things done. You get on the key committees, and then you use that power to get things done. In their case, a lot of times it's stopping bad bills instead of passing good ones, but it's still getting something done. It's stopping the bad stuff. So, no, I reject the idea that somehow Commerce has a worst list because they include committee votes. I'm grateful that they did. It's high time we started scoring that because it's been the basis for too much trickery in the past.
That's Mark Moore, the website arneighbors.org, and that's his comments on the scorecard, And